Hey guys, 2 minutes past the hour, so we'll get started. I'm still seeing people joining. That's pretty cool, but we got to get started. Got a lot of material to go through today. Let me start with some introductions. I'm Guillaume Boivard. I'm the Director of Product Innovation at SherWeb. You may have seen me from many webinars in the past. I'm joined today with Camille Like, who's the product owner for Office Protect. Today, we're not going to talk a lot about Office Protect. We're actually going to talk about how to secure Microsoft 365. This is a slightly more technical presentation than we usually do, but if you're not necessarily a system administrator or something like that, don't be scared. Like, it's a very accessible presentation. The goal today is to show you how you can, for no cost at all, take best practice actions to help the security of your Microsoft 365. And I'm being and we'll show you how, we'll show you where the portals are, we'll show you the configurations that would help you. If you're a super expert of Microsoft 365, this might be a little too simple for you. There might be some new stuff that you haven't seen before. So let us know what you learned today. Little administrative items. We're recording this webinar, obviously. We will send you in the next, let's say 72 hours, we'll send you a link to the recording. So if you have to drop off or anything like that, don't feel too bad. If you want to share the presentation with other people, please do. If you have questions, there is a question box in the app that we're using, the GoToWebinar app. Put any questions you have in there. If you think we're saying something that's not accurate, call us out on it. The goal today is really to give you a list of things that will cover 3 main aspects when it comes to the security of Microsoft 365. So the first thing, how do you secure a new customer? Like, what do you do when you get a new tenant, either from somebody transferring, like they're a new customer of yours and you want to help them be a little bit more secure, or it's literally a brand new tenant that you just bought from Microsoft? What do you do ongoing? So how do you translate that into ongoing security, make sure everything is there and available and remains safe? And then let's knock on wood that you will never need it, but statistics say otherwise. What do you do when an account has been compromised? There can be other security issues with Microsoft 365, and we'll talk about that during the presentation. But a core component to remediation in Microsoft 365 is dealing with user accounts. If you're keeping them secure, if you're monitoring them closely and acting quickly when they're compromised, you'll already be doing pretty good with the security of Microsoft 365. You'll have some big things covered. At the end, we'll give you access to some of the resources that we were mentioning during the presentation. We'll make the presentation itself available in a slightly more expanded technical version. And then if there's any questions we haven't answered during the process, we'll do it at the end. So we will go through everything, starting with securing a customer, just to be completely transparent. So basically, we're trying something, me and Camille today. She's going to be the hands, and I'm going to be the voice. So she's the one that's controlling the demo. She will show you in the portals and everything. Since navigating the admin portals of Microsoft 365 can be a little bit busy or complex, I'm going to be talking over it, trying to give you a sense of what we're accomplishing here today. We'll get started right away. When something is not available to everybody, we're going to point it out. So if something requires like premium licenses and things like that, we're going to call it out. If we don't call it out, it means that you have access to it. Doesn't matter, like generally, it doesn't matter what kind of license you have access to all those things, and you have the ability to do them. So the key things when it comes to configuration, I'm not going to read all this slide because we're going to go through it practically. We're going to look at securing account access, keeping a close eye on admin privileges, which is so if you're going to get hacked, make sure it's a standard account, not an admin account. I know nobody picks how they get hacked, but what I mean by that is you got to pay closer attention to administrative account and their security. We're going to look at preventing data extraction as much as possible, because that's sort of it's a core component of today's security of Microsoft 365. And then we're going to see if we can help you prevent some phishing, malware, and spam attacks, as that is still the most common vector of attack and breach. Good old email, good old phishing, bad attachments, phishing links, things like that. So let's get on the practical side of it. Before we do that, yeah, nice visual representation of what we're talking about. So to do what we're talking about today, you would need access. You would need to leverage the access to all these different portals. So the admin center, the SharePoint admin center, the Team admin center, the Microsoft Defender portal, the Exchange admin center, and the Microsoft Entra admin center. You'll understand that one of the reasons we're doing this presentation is to plug our tool, the Office Protect software and service. The idea is you can do all those things through a single portal and leveraging our new security assessment tool, which we'll talk about a little bit further. I can talk about it now. We launched it just a month ago or two. It is a free tool to do the assessment of security. Everything that we'll talk about here today, you can run the security assessment and see if you are configured properly already. And you don't need to buy Office Protect. You can just use it. This tool was introduced to help the MSP community see how they're performing when it comes to the security of Microsoft 365. So we'll have the links at the end, things like that, but I'm mentioning it now. You can go to scan.office-protect.com and you'll be able to use this. You can do it now, but ideally you would listen to this presentation and then do it later. Let's get into it. So the first thing that we'll do is go to the Entra admin center. For the people that are confused, like what the hell is Entra? Pardon my French. It's basically the replacement for Azure AD. So Microsoft, in all of its wisdom and marketing ability, has decided to rename Azure AD to Entra ID. And then everything related to identity and access management at Microsoft is now called Entra. What Kemi is doing now is she's basically adding a couple of columns to the user report. The reason that she's adding those columns is that by default, she cannot see the information that we need right now to do the verification that we're doing. So the first couple of things that we'll be checking is we'll want to make sure that our global admin don't have a license assigned to it. And actually, that's a fun one to start on because let's do an informal survey. You don't even have to raise your hand or anything. How many people here have an account that is a global admin and is also a regular user with an email account and everything like that? I would say most people are in that situation. It's one of those best practices that has not been completely put into practice. The reason why it's an issue is that we want to reduce the attack surface as much as possible for admin accounts. We talked about it, and one of the very simple way to do that is not to use one. So when you're working, you have a regular account. When you need to do global admin stuff, then you use that account just for that. And that really reduces the chance that you'll click on a link while logged into it or read an email that has a bad attachment or whatever new horrible thing that's going to happen in the future. So you can now see with the columns that we've added two things that are for the security of admins. One, do they have a license assigned? And you can see that EdTruck, our admin, doesn't have a license assigned and does have an alternate email configured. So that's the second thing. You want to configure an alternate email for your admin accounts. Why? Well, if they get hijacked or broken into, God forbid, that will make it a lot easier for you to recuperate access to them and then kick the bad people out. If you have no alternate email, once you've lost control, you're in a bad way. If it's your only global admin, then you're in a horrible way. Like it's going very poorly. You're having a horrible day. So that is one of the couple of the simple things that you can do. The second thing that we're looking at now is we're navigating over to the role and admin report. The reason that we're navigating over there and not just checking the all user report is that in the all user report, you cannot see role that people have assigned. So you have to go the other way, go to the list of roles. And then once you're in a list of roles, you can see the number of users that are assigned to it. And you can take an inventory of if that is okay or not. The reason for that, one of the important things to control is permission sprawl, let's call it. So you want as few admins as possible, generally, and you want the role to be as limited as possible. So one of the things that Microsoft has is a lot of specific admin role. So I don't know if you can just move back to the list of... So all these names on the left, some of them are custom, so because I'm pretty sure blah, blah role test is not one of the standard role. But all these other roles are all standard roles that exist to allow you to give very specific permission for the people to do the things that they need to do. So if you're a bigger MSP and your Exchange admin is not your SharePoint admin, then give them the correct role. Don't give them global admin. Don't give global admin to everybody. So I would say there's a big difference too. Like global admin is the absolute worst because it gives access to do everything. And then every other specific role is a little bit better. Like it's a little bit more restricted. We give a general rule of thumb, like of less than 5 global admins. If you have more than 5 in a small medium business, there's probably something wrong with your access management. The other quick note that I will give here is if you find this a bit tedious and you want to automate this or do it at a bigger scale, tools like PIM and PAM, so privilege access management and privilege identity management, are product categories that help you to manage those things. Some of them will give you like just-in-time access, so you can request an access when you need to do something. It will create a user, give you access, and then destroy the user right away, and some more advanced things like that. Let's move on to MFA, unless I'm missing something. No, all right. So the importance of MFA is something that we need to talk about. Like, well, I don't know if we need to talk about it. Everybody understand that MFA is like not perfect anymore. Like I think we're all clear on that. It's not the panacea that's gonna solve everything, but it's such a good barrier of entry. Like it's such a limiting factor. We're well aware of token hijacking and things like that. Like there are ways to get around MFA nowadays. But if you're not doing MFA, it's like leaving the front door open. Like nowadays, like it's kind of a basic step that you have to do. The first thing I'm going to mention is per user MFA. It's the free, easily accessible as quickly. It might not be accurate, but it's the way to do it for anybody that has any kind of license. You can do the per user MFA. It's the old school approach to MFA for Microsoft 365. Microsoft has a weird relationship with per user MFA. They keep trying to deprecate it, and then they change their mind when people complain, and then they push it back, and then they deprecate some ways to access it, and then they move it, and whatever. So our opinion, which is like we're well connected to Microsoft, but it's not our decision. But from our point of view, if you can move away from per user MFA, you probably should. Because on a long enough horizon, it's going away. Like it will go away eventually. If you have nothing else right now and you want to use it, it's a lot better than nothing. Like it's still MFA and it still works. The other thing that most people can access now is what's called security defaults or defaults. Basically, security default is Microsoft's way of giving everybody access to MFA and a few other security controls. I don't know. We don't have them here listed here, and we won't go into the detail of all they enable or disable, but it's something that you can look up easily. We also have it in our documentation for Office Protect. We have the explanation of security default. If you have a simple organization, it is often like a very good idea to use and leverage security default. It does the job. It helps you with a number of things, including access to Azure or limiting access to Azure. And I would recommend it. I would strongly recommend it. The problem with security default is it's an all or nothing thing. It's a switch. It's on or it's off. There's no configuration. There's no flexibility. There's no nothing. So if it fits your reality, especially for your smaller clients, go security default. Like I'm all for it. I think it was a great idea for Microsoft to do this. If you run like slightly more complex organization, 100 user plus, things like that, it quickly sort of runs out its welcome. But in larger organization, often you have access to the next MFA method, which is conditional access. Conditional access policies are part of Entra, so Azure AD, and they're a big rule engine that allows you to really build your access the way that you want to do it. There's a few pre-mates, which we can see on the screen right now, to help you to keep it simple. But after that, if you want to dig in and modify it and make it custom, like it's all there for you. The problem with conditional access policies, it's not accessible to everybody, and you need it. Basically, what used to be called Azure AD Premium is now called Entra ID Premium. That is part of Microsoft 365 Business Premium. is also part of like the enterprise, most of the enterprise SKUs. But if you have something like basic standard, no luck. So that's when security default comes back into play. So one of the things that I want to mention here is there is no easy way to see, and this is hard to demonstrate because there's no easy way to see it. There's no easy way to see the state of your MFA today. So you can come here, see the list of policies. You can go to see if your security default is on. But it's hard to, in a single view, to see like who's registered, how are they registered, was their last login on an MFA, was MFA requested at their last logins and things like that. It is one of the challenges that we've had related by a lot of partners, a lot of MSPs, especially the ones that have a lot of clients. It's easy enough to turn things on. It's hard to get a holistic view of everything and to know if you have everything turned on. Last thing for this section, applications. So it's an interesting concept. Like people, you can't install an application in Microsoft 365. Like only Microsoft has access, but you can install what's called third-party application. And at the end of the day, what that does is you're giving access to an external application to some or all of your data and permission and backend and all that through what is called a service principal generally. So basically, the external application, for example, the list that you see here would all be applications, now have some level of access to your Microsoft 365 tenant in theory and in practice to operate the application. If I'm getting a new tenant, one of the things that I would do is go check that list of application that has permission. Camille just showed us this is where you go to see those permission. I will give Microsoft credit. Most of them have a good name and description. And if you click, you will see the details. Like they took the time to document all this. And it really, if you take the time, like it's not 5 minutes, but if you take the time, it will give you the information and you'll be able to know what this application is doing. I would say the minimum step is more about knowing what application your client use, especially a new client that you're onboarding, and figuring out, is this an authorized use? Is this shadow IT? Is this a bad? Is it an attack? There's definitely some applications that have been used frequently for attacks. So we had we had a number of cases where an application called Perfect Data, right? Perfect Data was used to basically, it's a backup software, but it was used to exfiltrate a bunch of data from tenants. So it was a phishing thing. They installed Perfect Data and then they stole all the data. So you would have seen Perfect Data here. You can see we have an application called Suspicious App. Probably not a good thing. And then, like you saw, Camille check the permission that this application has. All right, let's talk about. Oh yeah, I didn't have note for that one. So what you're seeing here is sort of the overall permissions for application. So who can install which application, sort of as a simple choice. We by default, which is to me is very surprising, but still, like we tested it again this week, the default is allow user consent for apps. So any user can agree to install an app for themselves. To us, that makes no sense. We would strongly recommend limiting that. If somebody needs an application, I think they can go through you or their administrator or whatever, rather than just by default having access. Again, like with anything with security, I recommend strongly do strong change management when you're changing those things. Like people should expect that they're losing permissions or things like that. It shouldn't surprise them because otherwise they get angry at you. But I still think it's a good idea to take action on that. Okay. Let's move to to the next topic. Unless I'm missing something. No. So data extraction. One of the key things that attacker tried to accomplish this day, especially in what's called double ransomware, is extract data that they can then blackmail you for. So I'm sure you're all aware. Like I'm seeing people like in the list of and like know a lot more than me about security. So sorry I don't want to talk down to anybody, but I just want to make sure everybody understands. ransomware nowadays, like the part where they encrypt all your files, but usually now the process is they go in, they don't make any noise, they steal all your data, and then they encrypt it. And then they ask you for Bitcoins or money, whatever, to decrypt it. And even if you don't go for that, they then ask you for money to not publish your data publicly and just release it to everybody, whatever they found that was valuable, like your list of client, bad things that you've done in the past, like whatever it is, your source code, like there's a number of things that they will just put out there. So they'll ask money for that. So it's a good idea to make sure that you restrict the sharing of information as much as possible. One of the basic things, why would you share your calendar externally? Strongly advise against that when we're talking about social engineering, which we haven't talked so far. It is one of the main way to get a credible story together is I'll look at your calendar. And if I know more information than I should, then I can make a much better story about your company and why you should give me access to whatever it is that I want to get access to. So turning it off, simple here. We're now in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center in the org settings. Really? It's not in the Exchange Admin Center?
No.
Okay, great. Thank you, Microsoft. So in the org setting, you can change the calendar setting. Next thing that we'll talk about is in Team. There's an interesting feature that is not often discussed that allows you to use third-party storage. When I say third-party storage, I mean things like Box or Dropbox or other software like that you can connect to your Teams and use it as storage. So the problem with that is once your storage is disconnected from your Teams and your Microsoft environment, it's a bit out of your control. So it is generally recommended to turn all these off unless you have a specific plan to use it and then to give control to your, like some other way to manage it and control security. So that's one of those little known features that we recommend turning off unless like specifically you need one. And if you need one, then turn it on for that one specifically. Don't turn them all on. Microsoft obviously is recommending to turn them off, but that's more about like getting you to use their storage. You know how it is. But still for security, we recommend avoiding this feature unless you're consciously picking a storage provider. And they're on by default, just so everybody's clear. The next thing in Teams is the guest access settings. So if you haven't looked at those, good idea to take a minute to look at it. We're giving you suggestions, but I think the minimum that we're hoping that you get out of this is take a minute and go have a look. Because if you do that, then you'll be able to make your choice. And as long as you're making choice, it's a lot better than just leaving the defaults. Some of the key things, removing the ability to make private call as a guest. Why be able to send messages like directly, like have chats, all those things we would recommend turning off. The reason being that if you have them on, you can have a guest connect, nobody sort of hears about them, and then they're talking directly to your staff. And I was talking about social engineering. That's a pretty good door into a lot of good social engineering. Like at the end of the day, why do you want guests in your teams? Generally, it's to do meetings, right? Like you want to allow them to connect to meetings with your organization. So you can turn on like most of this and still have them connect to your meetings and do what normal guests are usually doing with Teams. We can even see here, like you can even reduce what they're able to do in a meeting. For example, meet now in channels, I would personally remove if it was my organization. All right, let's take a trip to the SharePoint admin. And I know we're skipping around a lot, but if Camille went and clicked in every menu hierarchy to get to everywhere, like that would be most of the presentation. Don't worry, all this stuff is documented, like all the things that were recommended are documenting, and then we'll also give you a much better trick to do all this in the next few minutes. So first thing in SharePoint, like there's only a couple of things we've put in SharePoint. SharePoint is a big monster and you can do a million things to it. If you're not using it professionally, like with a lot of controls and implementation, maybe with a consultant or whatever, here's a couple of things that I would look at. One, I would block guests from sharing content. And two, I would remove any anonymous sharing. So blocking guests, I think, is obvious. The anonymous sharing can be a little bit of a pain in the butt. But if you think about it, it makes sense. Like, why would you allow your staff to just send a file to whoever can find the link? Like, as long as you have the link, you have access. That's not enough security. Like, if I'm sharing anything with somebody externally, I can name the person I'm sharing it with. It's not that hard. So we think that sharing externally shouldn't necessarily be prevented. Like, that is very restrictive. Depends what kind of company you run. But for most people, preventing to share anonymously is a good idea. If you want to make a file accessible to a whole bunch of people, SharePoint and OneDrive really aren't exactly the way. You should use a website. Like, for example, like put the file on your website and make it accessible to the public, publicly accessible. If it's in your organization, generally, like, you're much better sharing it in a targeted way. We're moving around again and going to Defender. You should have a look at your spam policies. I believe there are some by default, but there's a few things that you want to take the time to turn on yourself. One of the recommended one that we're looking at now is the block by specific language. Did I miss something?
No, that is one.
Okay.
The language.
So you can block specific language coming in. It sounds weird, but think about most of your clients. Do they receive like legit business emails in multiple language? Well, to my friends in Quebec, Emmanuel, yes, we do, but it's still just 2 languages. So you can block everything else. To the people in the US that are here, maybe like English and Spanish, things like that. But it's a very limited set of languages that you actually. And the way that it works, it will look at the region from the email, and a lot of spammers, like, well, the ones that aren't that good, honestly, will put a different region, like we'll have a different region or language in their source, and that gets blocked. The other thing that we have that's similar is also the source country. So source country, source language. It just makes sense. Like, it's a way to reduce email traffic without like necessarily spending a lot on additional security. So this is accessible to everybody. So Camille, I don't know why, but she wants emails from France and French. Like, what a surprise. I think we skipped over just a word on the external tag. I'll mention it for a second, but Camille can't show it, and that's one of the crazy decisions for Microsoft. So there's a neat feature in Exchange in Outlook that allows you to have a tag next to the subject line that says external if it's an external email. I think a lot of people are familiar with it or have seen it like one way or the other. The interesting thing, there is no place in the interface, like you've seen a million control panel now today, none of them include a way to turn that on. You have to do it through PowerShell. It's not a complex PowerShell, it's a single command. But it's still like sort of assume that you'll go in PowerShell to turn that on, which to me, I don't know, I have a hard time sort of justifying that. But yeah, we would recommend turning that on. It's an easy one to do. It's not it doesn't prevent phishing. It just helps a little bit, but every little bit helps. Okay, so we looked at the anti-spam, anti-malware.
Maybe a quick Guillaume before on the outbound spam notification.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. So Microsoft offers a free service if one of your accounts starts spamming out. So for example, you have an organization and one of the users in your organization starts sending spam, it will notify you, except it won't. Because by default, there's no destination configured for that alert. So you have to make sure that you go into the page that you're in now, the protection settings, and you make sure that you put in a destination for notify these users in the group if a sender is blocked due to sending outbound spam. Again, good feature, bad user experience, if you ask me. A little bit on Microsoft, that one, I'll be honest. So it takes you a minute, just go configure it. If one of your accounts is spamming, either a marketing person is doing the wrong thing, or the account is hacked. So I think it's worth it to check these alerts and make sure that the account is not hacked. Okay, switching one more. Oh, go ahead.
A quick note on where to find all of these settings. It's in the email and collaboration tab because it's not shown here. So, quick note.
Okay, so in the Defender portal, in the email and collaboration tab, in policies and rules. So that's not necessarily obvious, but there it is. Okay, one more portal, I think, or is it the same portal?
It is.
Okay, so in the security admin, we talked about blocking language, countries. Next thing that we recommend is blocking extensions. I always have a quiz for people like what extension, like file extension, like .exe, like which one is blocked by default by Microsoft 365? The answer is none of them. So interestingly, Microsoft does not use the file extension as a way to block things by default. It will look for malware, like it does that for sure. But why would you even open the door? Like, unless you're a programming or development, like software development company, why would you open the door to .bat, like files, like which throws me back to my DOS days, which is nice, but also completely useless. Like, there's a lot of different extensions that there's no way you're going to receive an attachment that is legitimate and that is this type of file attachment. There's no way. So we, in Office Protect, for example, there's a bunch of extensions that we recommend to block. You can do your own work here and come and select what you want from the list. I believe there's a list, right, that Microsoft provides. You pick things from a list.
Yeah, we have a pretty good documentation on that.
So Microsoft will help you pick, but they still expect you to do the job. And if you don't know it exists, too bad. Next thing, there's a couple of premium things. So if you have Defender for Office 365, you should definitely make sure you turn on safe links, safe attachments. I believe they're not turned on by default, so like you have to take action. So you've bought, let's say you've bought Business Premium, it means you have Defender for Office 365. Buying it is not enough. You have to go in and turn that stuff on in a policy. I won't go into a lot of detail what safe link and safe attachment means, but basically it means it checks the link in email and it checks attachments a little bit closer and do detonation and things like that. If you have E5, if you're one of the lucky people that have the big all-dress pizza licenses, then we also recommend you turn on safe documents. That will basically do a similar security like malware check on every file, like in your OneDrive and SharePoint and all that stuff. It's kind of too bad that they're hiding it behind the biggest license, but it's still a very good feature. And if you have it, you should definitely turn it on. Recommend it strongly. Okay. Are we still following? It's a lot of stuff, I know, but it's all things that you can do day to day to help your clients. Exchange admin now. We've switched admin again. They all look slightly different one from the other. So one thing that we recommend strongly that you do is go check the mail flow rules in any tenant that you now control. If it's brand new, shouldn't be a problem. If it's a new client that has an existing tenant, I would definitely go there. So basically, we talked about it. Phishing and email is still a place that people get in and leverage to do bad things. One of the things that they'll do is they'll want to control the information. So either extract everything to themselves, so send every email that they receive to themselves externally, or they'll want to hide some emails. So you're receiving emails and they hide them. So those are two very common bad rules that we've seen created by attackers, and you want to check. I'll be honest, more likely than not, the rule is not going to be called block all messages. We've seen a lot of like ... and things like that. We'll talk about it in a minute. But you want to look at like what Camille was showing us is once you've opened one of those rules, you can see what it does. Like it's fairly well translated by Microsoft as to, I say that, but so it does tell you, so apply this rule if, and then do the following. The fun part is it shows you the design of the alerts and things. So it's not always human readable, and especially if it's an attacker that created it, they might have done some work to obfuscate it. but it's worth having a look at like what it does. Generally, most organizations have a few rules, but not necessarily a ton. It shouldn't take you all day to check those, and it's worth your time. If you create a rule like the first one here, block auto forwarding to external domains, so you can leverage Mailflow rules to prevent some of the common attacks that are being done. The challenge with Microsoft is you have to maintain it. So you'll have to make sure that your users are in it and they're accurate. Well, at least you're not missing anybody that's active. But you can do it through the rules. It doesn't cost anything. You can just execute it. Okay. So that is the first set of things that we would check. Like that is the set of things that we recommend you check. These, like I said, most of these, like 90% of those were accessible to everybody. Everybody would have access to those. Here's the little sales and marketing part of this presentation, and we'll come back to Microsoft in just a second. But I was talking about the security assessment just a few minutes ago. Tool that we released, scan.officeprotect.com. You give us access to your tenant in the same way that you would give access to, let's say, Office Protect, but we do it very temporarily. So we will run the scan and then delete our own application and remove our own access. Like we want it to be as transparent as possible with everything that we do. But basically what it will do is it'll scan the configuration of your tenant and give you a sense of which of the things that we just talked about are correctly configured or incorrectly configured. So for example, the first one here is like anyone can install third-party application in your tenant. We talked about that. So we'll make the verification and we'll also give you guidance on how to fix it. I believe the link there takes you directly to so it takes you to our support site that has a lot more information about what it means and where to find it in Microsoft. You can see the link and not the link, but the screenshot with the suggestions and everything. So if you do nothing else from this presentation, I would recommend trying the security assessment. It will produce the web form that you just, well, not the web form, the web page that you just saw, and it will produce this downloadable PDF version. Most of our partners, what they do is they'll do the web version at first. They'll fix everything. Then they'll produce the PDF and they'll give it to their clients and say, like, look, I'm doing a great job. It's a good way it's a good value to include in your regular touch point with your clients to show that things are still good and you're still taking care of things. One of the challenges that our partners have expressed is that if they do their job well, then the partner, like the client, doesn't hear about them, like everything is good and everything's going well. So including things like that show that you're like taking the time to make sure everything is right is generally a good strategy. For the people that haven't seen Office Protect so far, just a quick overview. So for example, this is the setting page, and basically what we did is not magic. So we took all these recommendations of configuration and put them in a single page. So you don't have to know the 8 different portals of Microsoft and where things are and everything. And we've given you some of the flexibility here and the options of picking whatever you want. You can see here, for example, enable save document not accessible because it needs E5. Well, it will tell you. And that happens. Like it's not magic. Like we're not replacing Microsoft here. We're just making it so much easier. I'll give one, like, and you can create profile. You can apply those profiles to all your customers. You'll know if anybody gets off the profile, things like that. Like make it very, very easy to use, and we make our own recommendations. Sometimes we make settings a little bit more valuable. So, for example, which one is it? Sorry, what's my example? Some of the stuff around, let's say block by file extension, we'll give you suggestions of lists of extensions. You don't have to pick your own. So that's a pretty good example of things that we've done for you. Is we've gone through all the extension and we're like, well, these are really shouldn't have those. Like it's very unlikely that you'll ever need those. You can still customize, like you're not stuck with it, but it makes it a little bit easier. The other one is preventing phishing. So we have one where we create the list for you and we'll update it for you instead of you having to go in and re-update it every time there's a new employee and our employee that leaves. We'll do it for you. We'll refresh it every 24 hours for you. So this is the one. Another new page for the people that have seen Office Protect but haven't seen it recently, we made an MFA audit dashboard. So if you just go back up, Jimmy. So we'll give you a sense of what's happening on a meta level. So all your all your tenants, and if you have 100 tenants, you'll see everything from a single glance. But then after that, we'll go into the detail for each company, like which one is working correctly and which one has people that are not covered. If I go to the detail of a list of user for one company, or all companies, good too. It's a demo environment. So obviously we'll go a little bit weird. All right, so let's not worry about it. I've seen it. It works. So this is the demo accounts, and sometimes they're a little bit weird. Let's just move on. So we'll give you a list of all the users that are not registered or have had problems and things like that. So you'll be able to act very, very specifically on specific users instead of having to go through a million. Like if you have 100 clients and they have 100 users, that's a lot of verification to do to see if people are enrolled and things like that. So this will produce a nice overview, give you the ability to do it very quickly. Okay, we'll come back to Office Protect a little bit later, but let's go back to things you can do. So this is the next section, and we're now in how do you monitor a tenant on an ongoing basis. We talked about this already, like checking your yes, thank you. So keeping the customer secure. So a couple of things you should constantly monitor. They're listed here. We'll go into the practical aspects of it again. I'll take just a second. Oh, I see that we have a few comments and questions. Okay, so that's the link. So now you have the link in the chat. Resetting block anything. Okay, so I'll come back to the questions at the end. It seems like a good question. Okay, so when we're talking about monitoring a client, we'll add one new portal, and then there's one we already visited today, but is has a different relevance here. So the Purview portal is now the portal for everything compliance from Microsoft, or data. Well, I think compliance is how they call it. So for example, in our case, we'll do log reviews there. So if you want to see what's happening, it's a place to do it. Again, Office Protect, single portal, everything there, the ability to do things. One thing I didn't mention about Office Protect, also it doesn't restrict what you do with Microsoft. So if there's something we don't support in Office Protect and you're an Office Protect client, you can still do it through Microsoft. Okay, let's get into what to review. So now this is really a case of things you should do on an ongoing basis with your client. We talked about it before already, so we'll go quickly here. Make sure you know how many global admin you have. Make sure the app permissions are reviewed. Any application you don't recognize, I would certainly review the permission. We talked about it quickly last time, but we'll skip the demo now. One thing that Microsoft doesn't really recommend, but we do, is making sure you review your inactive user that still exists. So there's really two reasons to do that. One, it's attack vectors that you don't need. So if the user is not active, like why do you still have it? But really the important second thing, and it has very little to do with security, is you might be paying for a license for nothing. So as you saw, this user is completely disabled, but still has a license assigned to it, and you're paying for it. I know I work at SherWeb and I'm here to have you buy more licenses, but like we're not interested in a license that are not being used. Next thing that you should review is guest users. So you can sort user type and have guest users being displayed. One thing of note that it's a bunch of things that surprises us when we work with Microsoft. Guest users never expire. So there is no default lifespan or anything like that for a guest user. It lives as long as you don't disable it. So that means that if in 2015 you had a KPMG audit like our organization here, and you created an account for that, it's still there. Is it hard when you see this account to think that maybe it needs to be disabled? No, not hard at all. Again, like just something that you should do on an ongoing basis. Obviously, if you could produce a report of guest users and then do that automatically, that'd be really great. I don't know why I mentioned that, but it's a good aspect. The other thing that you can verify, it goes back to the MFA that we were talking about. You can verify the registration of all users. So you can see how they're registered for MFA. If they're not registered for MFA, and you've enabled MFA a long time ago and they are active users, something is wrong. Like, they shouldn't be able to continue without registering to some methods of MFA. As you can see, this is mostly a test account, so there's not a lot of people that register. But as you can see here, and on the first line, when they are registered, it's very easy to see how they can do MFA. Going a little bit off script, but a question for you, Kemi. Is this where you would see last sign in if you had the feature?
No, it's in the sign-in logs, but just a note, this screen is only available to premium licenses. However, you need to go, if you want to check it without the premium license, you need to go through all of your users in the users page. And then you have the registered authentication method, but you need to go through all of these accounts, or you can use PowerShell, I think, to get the data too.
You would have to use PowerShell or some kind of scripting to talk to the APIs otherwise. Do you know which premium, like which feature, like which SKU gives you access to this?
Yeah, it's the Entra ID P1 or P2.
Okay. I really like Entra ID P1, I'll be honest, but I think everybody should have it by default. Like, that's my point of view on it. Okay. Or otherwise, learn a bunch of PowerShell, because PowerShell is very useful. Let's go back to the Exchange admin. So, two things. One that we talked about, which was the mail flow rules. We won't go back to it, but again, like verifying, making sure everything is straight. And then mail forwarding. So if you check all the way down to here, you can find which emails are being forwarded. And it's one of the features that attackers use to forward those emails that I was talking about before. So give themselves access to all the information for that user. So one of the first things that they'll do when they come into an account is turn that forwarding on. It's kind of deep down to find it, and it's a bit of a pain in the butt again. That this is kind of a recurring theme, but it's something that you could check either here or using a tool like Office. Okay, let's go to the next thing. It's a big thing. So we're now in the sign-in logs. Sorry, so in the sign-in logs, like, it's something that you want to review anyway, honestly. Like, there are some, there's a lot of information here that can be very useful. If you see somebody that's in Toronto, Ontario, in this case, suddenly logging in from Estonia, I think it is, right? That's Estonia. Yeah, thank you for that. That's probably not good news. Like, that could be something very suspicious. It depends on the level of activity of your tenant. If it's a very busy tenant, like, it's very, very hard to keep a close eye on everything and then catch it. But it's something that you should check. If you only monitor a few things in Microsoft 365, I would certainly look at the sign-in. Is this where? No, it's not where they show suspicious sign-ins, right?
No, it's not. However, on this screen, so you have access to this feature whether you have a premium license or not. But if you don't have a premium license, you can only have, I think, 7 days of data history. And I'm not sure that you can see the authentication requirement. That's pretty useful here.
Yeah, so that's what I was talking about a little bit before, like, to see if conditional access was applied to a login and things like that. We're behind on time, so I'm going to go a little bit quicker. Let's go to the review, the logs. So in the compliance admin portal, you have to build a report to sort of extract a bunch of data, and then you can consult that report to see things that have happened. So the example that we have here is we saw those login from Estonia for Michael Scott, like that boy. And we produced a report that extract everything that they've done for that period of time. From let's say here, it's from the 14th to the 16th of October this year. So that will produce this list of activity. Some of it is fairly obvious, like downloaded file and then the name of the file. Like I don't think that's that hard to figure out. Some of it is completely cryptic and very, very Microsoft centric, and you have to know how things work. Like good old folder bind, for example, is kind of hard to explain, or broke sharing inheritance, or like there's different things that show issued GATFR token. I'll be honest, I didn't know what issued GATFR token is, and if you look at the description, it doesn't tell you in plain English. So sometimes it's good if you want to see if they download a file, things like that, change permissions. Like you'll generally see it, but you kind of have to know your way around it. But it's a good place to know how to get to it. Okay, let's go to the next last phase with the few minutes that we have left to our time together. Again, if you have questions, please put them into the question section. We'll get to it. If we don't answer during the presentation, or let's say we run out of time, we'll insure you directly. Don't worry about it. Okay, so how to deal with a breached account. So let's say we come to the conclusion that Michael Scott has been breached and we want to take action. So there's a few very simple things that you need to do, but you need to do all of them if you really want to take care of a breached account. First thing, block sign in. So you want to make sure that the person cannot log into the account.
Sorry. So for the block sign in, you can either do it from the M365 admin center from the users list, and you have a block sign in. It's pretty obvious. However, if you want to do it from the Entra ID portal, you need to go into the edit properties and then check the account enable. I think it's in all at the end. Yeah, it's a bit hidden. But in the Entra ID portal, you have more features, just like the revoke session feature that you don't have in the M365 admin center.
So that was the next, sort of the next thing is you want to revoke sessions. What does that mean? It means if this person is already logged in and they're bad, if you prevent sign in, it doesn't kick them out. So you have to revoke sessions. Also, revoke session can be a good idea if you're not sure. So you want a little bit of a test to see if somebody is really who they say they are. You can revoke session and they'll have to do 2FA again, multi-factor authentication. So it can be something to use, but I would do it in all cases if you're dealing with a breach account. Reset password, I think it's pretty obvious. And then remove admin roles, which either they've added themselves some admin role and then you definitely want to remove them. But even if you had an admin account breach, it's not a bad idea to remove the admin roles anyway, and then take time to see if everything is clear and you're happy, and then give back the admin roles later. Last thing to check, two last things to check, and it's around email. Remove mail forwarding if it was configured, and we talked about it before. Like if somebody set up a mail forwarding thing, you want to make sure you check it and remove it. And then last thing, talk about the inbox rules. So there's many ways to manage mail flow, and the one that the user controls is inbox rules. And each user can create their own inbox rule. They don't have to ask anybody. They don't have to have special permission. And we talked about mail flow rules. I would say that it's a lot less common that attackers will touch mail flow rules. What is super common is that they'll touch inbox rules because they're easier. Like everybody has access to their own inbox rule, and they're harder to monitor. Like it's hard to see what everybody has done with their inbox rules. So it is hard to go and check it. Like it's fairly difficult. Either it's PowerShell again, or you have to give yourself permission to the account that you want to check and then go in and check it. And that takes forever. Obviously, the last solution is Office Protect. I'll tell you which one I prefer later. But yeah, so you want to do all those things. The last thing, make sure MFA is turned on for the person. So if it wasn't, turn it on. If it was, make sure it's still turned on. But I would take a minute to make sure that MFA is still there. Okay. Those are all things that we recommend. Honestly, dealing with a breach account is not as hard as it sounds. This is not legal advice, like you may miss something or there might be something that we didn't tell you. But if you follow those steps, you will have containment, like the account will be disabled and the person will be kicked out. I would certainly check the log for activity, everything that they did. Here's a quick look at the rest of Office Protect that relates more to this monitoring. This is the report section. So instead of the long list of cryptic messages, you can see that here we have a very specific list of action that fits the things that you should be monitoring. For example, here's the sign in from authorized country. So when Michael Scott logged in from Estonia, the person using Office Protect would have been alerted, given the detail, given the country, the IP address, given recommendations on what to do. And then, this is newer, given the ability to fix it. So going into Office Protect in this specific event, I can now disable user, revoke session, remove mailbox forwarding, and disable inbox rules in 10 seconds. No visiting multiple portal, not remembering where it is, not any of that, not remembering PowerShell scripts, God forbid. So this really makes it easier. You can also reset password directly from the interface. This is not a weird way to reset password. We leverage Microsoft's way of resetting password. Like, we're not reinventing the wheel. We're just making it easier. Last thing that I want to show you is our, so this is another example just to show you when we have different events, we have different remediation. So in this case, like, the alert is about an inbox rule that was created. The remediation is about removing that inbox rule. Like, we try to make it logical. We try to make it straightforward. Last thing that we'll show you from Office Protect while we're running out of time is the advanced report. So a lot of the things that we set around, like monitoring on a regular basis, gets really, really tedious, and you guys don't have the time. Like, you just don't. Let's be honest. With this, we can build, well, you can build reports in a second from our templates and everything, and have that information regularly sent to you. So for example, this report every month, or I don't remember how I configured it, but regularly we'll send you the list of all the forwarding rules that are configured in the tenant. Instead of having to go and check every account to see if they forwarded, which makes no sense. We were talking about permission and limiting it. This will give you the list of every user and the permissions that they, like, the role that they're in. So if you want to know how many global admins you have, you'll see it right here. It'll take just a second. You can even get the permissions that are associated with service principals, which are applications. So we try to put the information in a readable, usable format, make it as straightforward as possible. Moving on quickly, if you don't mind, we'll go back to the presentation. So we did all this. Here are the resources. So the scan.officeprotect.com, if we talked about it, give it a shot, try it. It doesn't cost anything. We don't take any of your information. We don't contact you for marketing. The guide to secure Microsoft 365, that will be available as a link. And then if you're a SherWeb partner or if you're not a SherWeb partner, I strongly recommend trying out Office Protect. One thing that I didn't mention, we even have a managed version or an MDR version where the alerts goes to our security operations center and we do investigation for you. That makes it even easier. So if you're a small operator or if you're a big operator and don't have the time to have your own security operations center, I would recommend checking out Office Protect Alliance. Either try it through a trial when you buy Microsoft 365 or get it through our NFR program, not for resale program. So for MSPs, there's either free or very discounted access to our Office Protect products. We're out of time. There's a bunch of questions. I kind of feel bad. So if you guys want to stick around for a minute, I'm going to answer some questions. So does the third-party setting block editing documents in Adobe Cloud through their SPO integration? No. So it only blocks the direct integration for storage into Teams that you saw in the list. If you have a third-party app installed that is Adobe, it wouldn't block it. That's a question from Jason. Thank you, Jason. Is there a way to know if there are users that are actively using connection to third-party storage? People really like the storage thing. Do you know if there's a way to get the information of who's using it, if any? I really don't.
I'm not sure. No, I don't.
Okay, so question from Chetan. We'll take your question, do a little bit of investigation, and then send you an answer. Any good recommendation for learning PowerShell and some of the features? So yes, there's many free courses out there, many guides and examples. It's actually fairly, if you have time to learn something, it's not the hardest thing to learn. Like PowerShell, if you're in the Windows ecosystem, learning PowerShell is a good idea. But again, I would recommend Office Protect. But I don't want to stop anybody from learning things. So the other one's a suggestion on how to do things a little bit better. So that's good. We'll have a look at that. So I want to thank everybody for coming out. If you have more questions, you can still put them in the box. We'll have a look, give you an answer. If you want to join us at SherWeb, if you're not already a SherWeb partner, then that's pretty trivial. You can just go to sherweb.com and sign up. If you are a SherWeb partner, or when you become a SherWeb partner, just ask about Office Protect or ask for support around Microsoft 365. Like, we have the best Microsoft 365 experts in the world, I would say personally. And then the Office Protect product just makes it easier, and it's as easy to use as can be, if you ask me. I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank Camille for the demo. Couldn't have done it without her for sure. Talking is the easy part. So thank you everybody for coming out, and reach out if you need anything from us. Thank you.
Guillaume, there's the last question. How do we get the recording?
What?
How do we get the session recording?
Oh, so you don't have to do anything to get the session recording. If you were registered to the webinar, you will get the recording in an email in the next, I said 72 hours when we started, and I was being nice to our marketing team. It should be in the next 48 hours. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.